Hello and welcome to Audio Gyan, an Indian podcast for those interested in design, philosophy and arts. Audio Gyan documents thoughts, ideas and insights from known and unknown gems of India who have done some remarkable work in their field of interest. Visit audiogyan.com for more Gyan sessions. Alright, we are back in a new episode of Audio Gyan and I have Vikram Gahlot with us who in the part 1, we had a brilliant conversation with respect to education and other things. And this podcast will be more towards slightly understanding the Indian space of education. So thank you, Vikram, for giving us your time and welcome back on Audio Gyan.
Awesome to be back here, Kedar.
Yeah.
So where do we pick this up from? Shall we do a summary of what we looked at last time or just dive into it straight from where we left it off?
If you want to summarize, because there are a lot of thoughts going on.
Yeah, let's just continue actually.
Yeah. Sure. Obviously, we have spent endless nights discussing about overall mediocrity in the Indian space, which is happening, or for that matter, anywhere in the world. I mean, there are these top 5% of the people doing some great work and really setting the tone for the rest of the generations to come. So why there is such mediocrity overall in the market? Is it because of the education system? Or is it because of other social factors? What is your take on that?
So see, Kedar, I think what we are doing here is philosophy, right? Because the question why is the one that is going to come up probably most often when you have a discussion on education. There are a lot of things wrong with it.
Correct.
If you look at India, and there are going to be a lot of whys which do not have easy answers, which is the preserve of philosophy to go really deep into the whys. And if I think this is a better way to connect to the previous episode actually, because here I'm reminded of what we were talking about earlier. So let us say before any good answers to whys can come, you need some depth and width in subjects in the background.
Okay.
Now, in this day and age where education has become sort of a thing for consumption, certification, and which is directly linked to the jobs that you can get, it does not lend itself that easily to taking that time to go really deep into the whys of things. So philosophy in that sense is dead. But whenever a man goes deeply into something, philosophy is happening.
Correct.
So it's happening in a classroom every day in this world, everywhere.
Yeah.
But it's probably dead as such in the system which is production oriented.
Yeah.
One of the subjects which has died a big death is history, right? We were talking about it. This whole problem of India goes back to the fact that we don't know our history as a country at all. As a matter of fact, India was born only in 1947. I mean, there's no India before that. It's a different thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Which is not accurate actually, right?
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing that people call India and its problems is a story that starts from 1947.
Correct.
But it has roots going back. So India, let's assume that everyone has watched Three Idiots and Amir Khan. All right, so let's make that assumption. Even if you haven't, I think it will encapsulate India's problems very accurately by, first of all, dividing India up into, let us say, about 23% of the percent of the population is below the poverty line. According to a poverty line that was sort of shifted to make fewer people come under it and thus show better government performance. Yeah, they keep doing it all the time, all these committees. Tendulkar, I think, whatever, let's not go there right now. 23% are struggling for survival. But my own take on that would be 40%.
Okay.
Let's just put 40% people over there directly. Or, I don't know, 50. And then all that you are left with is probably some other strugglers who are doing better, but who are struggling from week to week instead of day to day. Then there's this middle class that we are talking about. And then there's this elite. Let's not talk about them. I don't think we're talking about them today.
No.
Right?
No, definitely not.
It's nothing wrong with being elite or talking about people who are elite. But this whole question of education, I think, has many other questions before we come to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing fine. I mean, Ambani's son is doing fine as far as education is concerned. I understand. Or we'll see later. If he isn't, he can get in touch with me. But anyway, so where were we? We were at this middle class, poor and whatever. Yeah, this is the major section of the society. And then there is urban versus rural, if you look at India. But overall, the problem of the production-oriented approach is much more obvious in a country like India, which accounts for a disproportionately huge percentage of the world's labor force as opposed to the world's inventor force. India has its place in the world as a developed country with a lot of people with arms and legs. Although that whole premise is coming up for questioning today, as Rajshri was mentioning earlier, that what's going on with jobs. And unfortunately, manufacturing is also not creating a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
And agriculture was supposed to be dead like a long time ago. And you're just doing the last rites of agriculture right now. People will leave it and then come to manufacturing. But now there are no jobs in manufacturing also. Now services, there is a story, but no apparent increase. They're already accounting for a lot of job growth. But that's what there is.
Marginal.
Now that is also being heard by AI, and also now they're all panicking, which is again another interesting area to panic about. But let's look at what are the basics that are wrong. So where were we? We were talking about...
like why there is so mediocrity in the market.
Yeah, so
overall.
India. So India, let us first of all understand 1/6 of the world's population, 16% Kedar. 16 to 17% of the world's population, India.
Correct.
What percentage of the world's income do you think? Just take a guess.
Sorry, I have no number.
You have to take a guess. Just take any random guess.
I mean, it's less than 10%.
Most people, yeah, I mean, it is less than 3%.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Population 16%, and your income is 3%. So, do you understand that if this was a colony, what would India be? What would that section of India be like? It's definitely not the nice houses.
Yeah.
It's a smaller houses, more people.
Correct.
Sort of slums of the world as well. So, what kind of education system will prosper if you leave it to market forces? And if you do not leave it to the government to make some plans for the future, do it with consensus, do it with transparency, track it long term. Let's forget it. Let's completely forget a government in India doing that right now. How it can do it, we can talk about sometime. But that's not happening. So the public system is broken and the rural system is directly connected to the public system. So we are talking about a whole lot of government schemes. Shall we go into that today, how they're managing that problem? But before we do that, let's understand very clearly that in the last episode, we looked at how the business lobby will only treat you as labor.
Correct.
Right? They've got their business to run right now, and what they want is all sorts of labor. And most white collar will also fall into that category. If you look at how elite the elite are, for them you are labor, right? Everyone is labor. So they just want supply of labor. They don't care about anything beyond that. So if you let market forces exclusively run the entire system, not just directly through teaching methodology in schools, when corporates sit there and dictate what kind of jobs are created, these are management decisions that are made. These jobs are not created in factories. A lot of people say Modi created 100,000 jobs. Or someone created how many jobs, I don't know. Everyone says nobody creates jobs. Entrepreneurs sit in boardrooms and create jobs. They talk to each other and say, let's hire a guy who does this. Okay. So when you're talking about jobs, if you look at the labor market, industrialists are very happy doing what they're doing with some sort of monopoly rights over whatever they've got, their markets, their resources, and just getting a steady stream of predetermined skill sets and people who will work from 9 to 5 every day. That's the model that works for them. But if governments were to look at it long term, what is the potential of our people? So do we agree that education ultimately is about saying what potential do we have to be the best that we are as a collective, as a society, be it I mean, a small group or a big one. Yeah, that's what education is.
Correct. Yeah.
It is, Chomsky calls it indoctrination. There are others who have defined it in different manners. Another way to look at it is the transfer of knowledge from one generation to the other. So this big problem that people have with theory, by the way, Kedar, in India, if you talk to people, everyone is very clear that theory is the problem. They teach too much theory in school. So I'm starting a new school, okay? And I want you to send your kids to that school. Are we good with that? Shall I tell you what the school is about?
Yeah, please.
So this school will have no theory, no textbooks. Are you happy? Yeah, everyone in India is happy.
I wouldn't be particularly very happy, but yeah, it's a good...
in India, everyone should be happy because all that they find wrong is theory. Okay? So you send your kid to my school, there are no books, no bags, no subjects, nothing in my school. Only every child, when you come to school, you're given two things, which are stones.
Okay.
So you got it?
Just 2 stones.
2 stones. Everyone is given 2 stones, and that's the entire 14-year plan of schooling.
So
they will bang the stones together, maybe.
To make
then there'll be a
fire?
spark. Then a fire will build or catch somehow. And then they'll invent everything in terms of technological change that we talked about through those 14 years.
Oh, wow.
And that's not happening. So that is why we are trying to do some theory. But the whole problem is that theory A is not accompanied by practical understanding of how are jobs connected to it, how is work connected to it. So teachers know nothing about actual professions because they've never done a job from another
But sorry,
profession.
I'll cut you here. And if you give stones, you are essentially asking the student to do it all over again.
Exactly.
But why, when we can live on the giants who have done some work?
So that is exactly what I'm saying. That it is impractical to suggest a purely practical school.
Correct.
You need theory.
Okay.
Yeah? And theory is extremely important. So theory is wrong diagnosis of the problem. Philosophical error.
Okay. So people who are cribbing
About theory.
about just being theoretical
Yes.
are partially wrong.
They are completely wrong because it is impractical to have a purely practical school. Theory is really important, but first of all, you need to ask somebody, you need exposure. Then you need to ask a child, what is your theory about it? That theory needs to be brought out. That is a pedagogy, that is a way of teaching which is very common. Not common, but which is
Used
well
to be
known.
common, yeah.
It is well known that this is the way it works best. You ask a child, what is your hypothesis? What is your theory? And you really worry a child with that question. Alright, they'll come up with fascinating hypotheses if you care to listen. 5-year-olds and 25-year-olds and others also. And then you tell them, okay, here's this guy who thought here's this guy who thought exactly almost like you did. Half of the times it happens that they think like so-called great people did. If you really ask them to make a hypothesis. Human minds work like that.
Correct.
And then once that hypothesis is made, about whatever it is, you tell them how other people have thought theoretically, but you also have to connect it with how work happens in the world. Unfortunately, our system, you can't blame teachers for it because teachers are supposed to be just specialists as teachers, and that's the specialist problem affecting us right now, which is why I think generalists are in demand right now. Are they? I don't know.
Yeah, I think I would be a generalist. So yeah. And I am not much in demand, but anyway.
Yeah, same here, bro. So anyway, practical has to accompany theory. But how can it accompany theory when a teacher himself has never been examined practically? So if I were to become Education Minister of India today, the first thing that I would do is ask every teacher to take an exam and pass it, and be suspended if they do not pass it.
Okay.
And to then design a question paper which actually tests application, and then ask them, all right, you teach everyone that an equilateral triangle has 3 sides. How does it relate to anything in the real world? Can you tell them anything about the engineering profession that understanding angles and triangles? No, you can't.
No.
Is this the problem of the teachers? Are they to blame?
No.
This is a production oriented system that was made with like a factory works
thoughts,
with departments doing very specific work, and teachers have thousands of constraints. Within these constraints, some teachers manage to do some great work. Like you were mentioning an example of sir who sends his students to the washroom and asks them to take measurements when he was actually trying to teach them interior design and architecture, and get little kids to get practically involved. But theory practical is all fine. Ultimately, when students come to me at an MBA kind of platform, by that time, yes, there is this bias towards theory. Practically, nobody has any idea because nobody had any idea when anyone was teaching. They have all the wrong ideas about professions, etc., etc. But the crowd that I get, let's agree, is 95% middle class. Extremely poor people are not coming, and elite people are also not coming. All right? Those are the ones that hire MBAs. So they don't come to study at MBA coaching institutes, right? And we try and do a good job with the kids. But with most, before you can teach them subjects, or you can think about thinking, or think about things like philosophy, history, research, design, which I think are common skills that every professional has to be good at.
Correct.
Anyone who is good is because he's or she is good at all four and your own area, right?
Correct.
Research is important, design is important, communication and design we can club in one.
Ethics is one, that
which is a different question altogether.
We'll not get into that
for
right
another
now.
day maybe. But as part of education, maybe ethics is really important to touch upon, and the role of religion as well.
So actually, I would like to take your thoughts and ponder more upon things which we were discussing earlier. Is about, like, if the system is not designed properly, there are again two more things which are obviously seen, very evidently seen from students, is that the exam system which we have, the marking or the grading system which we have in the
that is the second most common complaint in India after theory. So the first problem is theory, which I think is misunderstood. I think let's close that question actually of theory versus practical. Let's close it at, it's not about theory versus practical. Theory and practical have to go together.
Correct.
At the same time, the teacher has to make connections with real world work and professions and tell people, listen, this is how it is going to connect.
Which is to a certain extent in the earlier podcast which you said about apprenticeship and the practical knowledge.
Apprenticeship and that kind of an approach. But the problem is such teachers are missing from the scene. So are there such teachers in this world is my question to everyone.
I think there are. But there should be more, I think. That's my take.
There can be more. And my solution for that, so that is one place where I have a prescription. My point is that Kedar Nimkar today, is he a great guy to be teaching at a college or at a school?
Would he be a great guy?
Yeah.
I mean, education is something which
I think you like teaching. And you're passionate about education and design and a bunch of other fields. So it'd be great to get a class 10 student to get some time with you. Do you need Kedar Nimkar to teach class 6 students every day and be their class teacher?
Not really.
His skill set is different.
It could be like a visiting faculty.
Yes. But can he spend 1 hour in a week with children in class 6? Sometimes in a different school, sometimes in a different school. And try and, charm them or inspire them or make them go crazy about or get them really interested in his field.
Or at least make them sensitive about the real world applications.
So that is one connection that I want to make going forward this year. That is on the plate. So I'll be starting a series of workshops around the whole MBA question. But that is a direction in which probably I will go this year. Creating a platform where we act as sort of a bridge between industry professionals and people who want to learn something. So getting these industry professionals excited and interested is really difficult. It's not that they don't have time. They are busy people. But sometimes if you give them such offers, they're like, I would love to do such a session because my job is boring.
Correct. No, I think to a certain extent the alumni do this contribution back to the society by coming back to colleges, and I don't know whether schools.
No, this is not going to work in the way it does right now. To one extent it can, but when an alumnus comes back, I remember a doctor came to our school one day who was a product of our school. I was in class 10, I had a bunch of questions for him. Ultimately, all that he told us was how hard we had to study to clear those exams, and how a doctor's life was worth it. I wish, when I was a little child, Kedar, people used to ask me, what profession is it that you want? What are you going to be when you grow up? When I was a kid, my only answer was, the same answer every time was, I don't know what I'm going to become, but I know I'm not going to become a doctor who is going to sit in a room and have sick people come and talk to you all the time, every day of your life. Someone is going to cough in your face, someone is going to spit in your face. I was a little kid, okay? But I wish at that time a doctor had come and told me that diagnosis is the most important part of a doctor's job, and his job is actually like a detective's when it comes to diagnosis. And now, Kedar, I've gotten really interested in medicine, you know that. And on my own, I've been studying a little bit of it. Yeah. I'm so excited about it as a detective, a subject of detection. Let's not go to philosophy again. But yeah, you're asking whys, and that's a doctor's job. So if someone had told me that in school, the way I looked at my biology classes, so you understand that if it is a production-oriented and certification-oriented approach, that is not going to happen. Is the private sector, can it do something about it? I think at various levels, people can do something about it. Rural India, people say that because the public system is broken and there are no budgets for a poor country like India, we can't have a public education system. You tell me, Kedar, is it possible for me to identify bright talent at every village in India? Maybe work with them across a few centers, not one. And ultimately they go back to their villages and set up schools as private entrepreneurs. Why do the Ambanis have to build a hospital for us to say, this one village did well because of a hospital? Or why do the Tatas have to, in the name of social, or what do they call it these days? CSR. Yeah. In the name of CSR, someone has to go and build a school. Can't you make sure that every village in India has one world-class trained person? What kind of money will people pay in those villages? What world are we living in today? So where is this government scholarship that every girl in India, every village in India should have a girl who has probably gone to one of the finest institutions, either in India or the world, and who can come back and be an inspiration, and it will take a moment for them to change.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, it's borderline leftist.
Well, those are the only examples across history. That's my problem once again with the discussions of politics where left versus right happens, is that people have no background in history. So they can't discuss Kerala, they can't discuss Gujarat, they can't discuss West Bengal, they can't discuss the Soviet Union. That whole chapter on history is missing. So maybe we'll write a book about it, okay?
Yeah, sure.
But there are enough books already.
I'll design it for you. Yeah.
So the problem, Kedar, that we have to finish off with marks and exams is that was your original question. Marks are important. As a teacher, I have to know. If I was working in the Guru Shishya Parampara, I would not have 50,000 students. I would have 3 students, but I would make them tough as diamonds. And then they can cut 5,000 glasses. Otherwise, no point creating 500,000 people who are doing yogasans wrong. But today my point is, if a teacher has to deal at some scale, the teacher has to evaluate students. How much progress have they made? Okay. Also, they have to evaluate who is catching up slowly, who's catching up fast, so that they can plan for the student's future. And something like marks is not the big villain. There has to be some quantitative assessment if you are dealing with a certain number of students.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
The problem is not with marks. The problem is with the question paper. I went to Delhi University, so let me tell you about my mathematics degree. Delhi University, mathematics, my first 2 years, my percentage was 86%, which is good, above average. And topper is 96, I think, at that time. I went to an IIM Ahmedabad interview. I was literally thrown out, and they said, we are going to take your degree back because you're illiterate at mathematics. Now you tell me, how is it possible that if I was illiterate at mathematics, I had 86%, I did not cheat? How was it possible? How could it have been possible?
What they must have meant by illiterate is like not meeting the potential or their cutoff.
What they meant was that I did not know my ABCDs, and I admit to that being true also. After my exams, I did not remember a single thing. I mean, all of that was gone. It was there in my head just for the exams. But why do you think I could score 86? Because I had access to a great book. You are from Bombay, so probably you do not know of this book. If you are in Delhi University and you have great marks, it does not mean that you are good at your subject. It means that you bought a book 2 weeks before the exam. It is called
Guide.
10 years guide.
What?
10 years question papers.
Okay.
So you just look at the last 10 years question papers and you will score whatever it is that you can score with your ability. No problem. The entire paper is lifted out of the last 10 years. Engineering colleges, every professor's own book is the one from which questions are going to come in the paper. So that book will sell. Okay. And that is how people will get marks. If you make a question paper something that really tests somebody's basic understanding of a concept and its applications, then you get a furor like what happened in the 12th class exam of chemistry or physics, I don't remember. It was the paper like that. It was a good paper. It really tested whether somebody understood something. Or today one problem is that a lot of maths has taken over every subject. We'll come to it later. Understanding concepts and doing maths are different things. Okay. But even with that physics paper, parents were protesting across the country saying the future of our kids is at stake. Their mark sheets will be ruined this year. So the parents also are not ready to listen to this conversation. They are as much victims of the system as much as the victimizers right now. They wanted to carry on with this momentum because they are already invested in it. And it offers a hard and clear path saying that if XYZ goes on to an engineering college, he or she will become an engineer. And that's it. So this discomfort with ambiguity, we need marks, but it would not be a problem if people were being tested in a different manner. And if the testing was done more in the spirit of assessment. How many assessments are you doing in a year? But forget marks. The question paper comes first. But before we talk about the question paper, at least in the Guru Shishya Parampara, you were never told. If you were being tested, it was considered stupid to tell someone that he or she was being tested. A test is a test. If you don't know, a test is happening. All right. And that is where it all keeps coming back to teachers. Teachers. How do you get people who are passionate about learning? So the problem with teachers is you will not get these passionate people. You will only get them if you offer projects, and you need the framework of a project. So the theme of apprenticeship comes back again. I was talking to my dad a few days ago and I said in India, so dad had this radical idea after hearing me on this. He said after class 12, everyone should have to work for 2 years somewhere at an entry level job. That is why in terms of entrepreneurship, although India has more entrepreneurs, but the biggest companies of the world are American. Every pan dukan in India is an entrepreneur.
Correct.
But why are the Fortune 500 companies, I mean, look at the 500 biggest companies of the world and it's America. Because every kid in America has set up at least a Nimbu lemon stand, a lemon stand during summers and sold it for some cents. They got it out of their systems that they could just sit inside a classroom and score some marks and get a job. So I believe that what happened with India was that Indira Gandhi failed us big time. She turned it into a communist, supposedly communist nation in the name of a socialist nation. But we were standing in lines to get a Bajaj scooter. There was 8 months waiting list and then black in the market. Yeah, so it was practically a communist camp running in the country during Indira Gandhi's times. And my understanding of history is that it led to such a dark spell of this belief in the middle class that the only way that you could go progress was to shut yourself up in a room and study for 12 hours and clear some exam. Because for entrepreneurs, I mean, we're not talking about license Raj today. Neither are we talking about that government's policies and how they were carried out, because the economics of it is different from the politics of it.
Correct.
Okay. But one thing is very clear, that it had this huge scarring effect on the Indian mindset. So before we make any conclusions about our country, let us understand that 300 years ago or 400 years ago, in the 5,000 year-old history of the world, at the time of Akbar or even later, 1600s also, when the East India Company had just come, or 1700s, India was about 20%, 21% of the global population and 25% of the income or the economy or the GDP.
Yeah.
And today, India is 16% of the world's population and 3%. So clearly, we are not going to get an education system where we are going to be pampered. What the economists of the world are telling us is, get ready to become the next labor capital of the world. That is your strength. You are uneducated and young, and the best that can happen for you is if factories open up in India. Unfortunately, our labor is not as obedient as China's labor. So today, China's labor prices are higher than India's, way higher. But two things are difficult in India: labor laws and land acquisition. So when Modi came into power, these were the first two things that he tried to do. But he pushed them through an ordinance. And that ordinance did not last a long time. With the labor laws, also there was a strike of trade unions across the country. And land acquisition, I'm sure you know, that it got stuck across both houses. Now that they have a majority in Rajya Sabha, maybe they'll push it through. But even if they fix land, unless they fix labor, it will not happen. So what the capitalist free market wants India to become is its labor supplier. And that's how your education is supposed to happen. For some of us, if we can drive that change from within, people like us and others who are already working on it. I mean, you and I are hardly, I'm just doing my job these days and not doing anything revolutionary. You're doing, I think, much better stuff if I look at your podcast to begin with. But it's a start for me as well to be here with you today. But either it can be people who, with their own initiative, it comes from the private sector. But honestly, unless you get governments which are making huge impact. So over there, I'm a fan of Delhi's education minister. Maybe today not a great time to talk about details. People can read on Quora or wherever. But there are these models where if governments are intervening, some amazing changes have happened. Finland, which is number 1 in the world today in the education index, we can debate the index, but Finland was number 39 how many years ago? I don't know. And they are a great case study. And that is where Delhi's teachers went for trainings. I'm not saying they picked everything up from Finland and implemented it here, but if governments have will for education, it hardly requires budgets at this stage. It requires some kind of work, and it requires voters to ask their governments to focus on education and vote accordingly. As long as voting is going to happen on the basis of, I don't know, whatever it is happening on the basis of right now, you can forget about education. It will be left to NGOs, concerned individuals, institutions, that since the beginning of time, I mean, these have been the bedrocks of humanity. That is the only ray of light otherwise to look at.
I think, I mean, this was quite intense and a lot of...
I have strong views on the subject, and it will never end.
So Vikram, I would like to actually conclude with one last question, because I understand there are a lot of things to be discussed, and probably we'll have few more episodes discussing education in general. But this one I had not informed you about. It's slightly a surprise question. Which is very, very close to me, because whatever I have seen and also seen with my Guru Shishya Parampara style is that if teachers keep teaching the same thing, like there's a maths class where they have to teach whatever, like basic equilateral triangles.
Yeah. What is the challenge for them, you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, if they are teaching the same thing over and over again, and in fact, this is what I learned when I did a recent interview with Professor Sri Kumar, also, who's the head of IDC. His concepts and his audio gyan overall was very focused towards a newcomer in the industry or someone who's a slightly aspiring designer. So there is there learning happening within the teacher also to grow and to keep up with the market
It reminds me of this quote by Noam Chomsky again. So of course I'm a big fan. And what he says is, if you're teaching the same thing over the last 5 years, I mean, if it has been 5 years and you're teaching the same thing in your classroom, either the subject is dead or you are.
Okay.
As a teacher. So one thing is there. It's not about novelty.
But is this connected to the society level constraints also? Because it's also like whom you're teaching to, right?
No. I mean, as a teacher, I would say that first of all, your first duty towards yourself to be successful as a teacher is to make it interesting for yourself.
Correct.
If you are not going to plan to make it interesting for yourself, you're not going to last in this work. Or you're going to last in this work as a zombie. You'll be a zombie, you'll do your thing. But if you're going to stay engaged and you're going to do good work, then the first question is that of what are the important questions that you're working on with your students in terms of research. Before even their marks, their results, etc., what are your research topics? If you've got relevant research topics, 5 years later, your content is going to be different.
And this can happen across, right, from junior KG also.
Absolutely. Right? This has to be instilled and ingrained from junior KG. Where what is this research project? I mean, okay, maybe not junior KG, but as soon as they're capable of forming sentences or ideas about things and starting to understand the world, mini projects are the framework on which any soft subject can only be taught on the framework of something hard. So when in your Guru Shishya Parampara or in India's literary traditions, when you have a Kabir Das who's a Julaha or somebody who works as a weaver on a loom, and he has a lot of metaphorical references and allegories which talk about the weaver and the soul and how the soul is made of diaphanous material. These are not just metaphors. It is a fact that because of being a perfectionist at his work, he started understanding spiritual truths. Because what you understand in your work applies at other places also. And what you spend doing what you spend half of your time or more than that of your awake hours is your work. So this modern idea of let me leave my brains at home and report to my job, where I will do this given work for some time and be obedient like I was in school, only means that you'll be stuck somewhere in mediocrity for a pretty long time. No matter what money you make, you'll not do justice to your potential, for sure. You might get a little more money at times by squeezing it out or because of other environmental factors. But that is not work. So the spirit of work got destroyed. At least that is the so-called leftist agenda. But with the Industrial Revolution, Kedar, you will be surprised to know that today the concept of a job that we understand, and I'm sure you will agree that no matter what definition of education, it has to contain employment in the future. It might not just be employment.
That's the goal, I think.
But employment is definitely an important part of it, and the society is concerned also about it. I mean, you need people to take over a generation's knowledge and take it forward and keep the machines running and the system humming. All right, do it. But when we talk about employment, the concept of a job, which is very standard today, where Papa goes from 9 to 5, he's gone. And he's not particularly in love with his job. As a matter of fact, he comes back home and says, finally, I'm rid of that place and no work calls and nothing. Now this is family time. Okay, great. I mean, that's a model. But this was never a model till 150 years ago. Chattel slavery was considered almost as bad as wage slavery. And that is the word it was known by in the early industrial times of Massachusetts and the very early phases of the Industrial Revolution. Okay, so the first workers who were working in the factory felt very keenly that their soul was being pulled out because they were no longer in charge of their work. Even if you were a journeyman or a carpenter or a tailor, you had the freedom to decide your work hours or your work rhythms. I mean, you could go for a week to your wife's village for someone's wedding and then come back and take up work or take up orders accordingly. But as soon as you were working for a multinational, there were no longer these rhythms of work, and you were no longer an entrepreneur in charge or a skilled person in charge of his or own work, proud of his or own work.
This is brilliantly shown in Modern Times also.
Of course.
Charlie Chaplin.
Of course. So that is the one big departure. So at that time, Chomsky says that factory girls actually hired people to read to them as they sewed dresses. So they wanted to be up there in terms of knowledge and education. They were like, we are not going to let this dehumanize us. As a matter of fact, I mean, we'll have to come to the media, but let's not go there. But it is it is disproportionately less well known that in this early phase, there were workers who organized themselves and ran a much tighter ship and a very healthy community. So it is not to be assumed that a factory has to have an assembly line and only then will production be good. There are enough alternate models which we might have to save for a discussion on business one of these days. But there are well-known models like Maverick, the book the book written by Ricardo Semler. Just a Wikipedia look at this page should be enough to tell us. That
I've heard is like I read book after you recommended it. Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Oh. Not the entire book, but yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what I understand is that the assembly line was not made because it was the most efficient process. It was made because it controls people. It makes them accountable, and that's good in a way. But what it turned eventually your job into was one part of a big machine. There was never any accountability in the system to explain to you what you were doing, how it mattered in the bigger picture. Did you have any empowerment in deciding what was to be done, or while it was being done to give some feedback, or were you supposed to just do what you were told to? Which I think is today's schooling, today's education in one way. You might name a few schools, Kedar, as you were naming earlier, which have alternate methods. But let's again agree that that's in the domain of the elite, and we'll do a show for the elite someday, maybe. But right now the middle class needs to think where it is sending its kids and in what direction. Indira Gandhi's times are over, honestly. Modi's times are here. How are they going to be? I don't know. But Indira Gandhi's times are over. India is not the India of pre-1991, which is the most important year in the history of India since 1947. Okay. Now this is not pre-91 India. It's okay if you were born in the 70s or 80s or 60s and you have kids today, but don't harass them because the time that you grew up in was completely different. Maybe your rules, however terrible, worked for those times. Okay, but today this is going to be a disaster. The country is changing. The dimensions are not entirely positive. By the way, given all that leftist stuff, as you understand, I'm a severe critic of what was going on in the name of leftist policies. Although I've become a little more charitable now that I'm reading history, people have problems. My own execution sucks. So maybe Indira Gandhi, okay, we'll look at her sometime.
Yeah, maybe more critically later.
More critically also, we'll give her some. But those dark ages of India are gone. But our parents are living in that fear that their kid is not going to do well unless... So some exploration needs to happen. Only then will some interest happen. Only then will some hard work happen over a period of time. How can parents demand hard work out of children when they are denying them exposure? And if they are denying them exposure, how will kids get interested in anything? Once they get interested in anything, Kedar, you name any one profession in this world, legal or illegal, where people have not made impact, money, success, fame. Once there is some interest in some line, how can we hand down jobs to people? How can we create jobs for people? People have to create jobs for themselves. But at least they need empowerment.
Cool. I think I am like really short of words to comprehend what you're trying to say. Obviously, even I'll listen to this podcast over and over again to understand.
No, this is a can of worms that you're opening with education, man, because we're going to go to a lot of different places.
Yeah. I remember one quote which is in Bhagavad Gita, I think, which says Pariprashnena sevayasi, which is you don't stop with one prashna.
Yeah.
You pariprashna, like continuously keep asking questions, and that's how you gain knowledge.
The Indian tradition is that of dialogue, of philosophical investigation through dialogue, and not publishing anything.
Yeah.
So that,
but I'm
this
going
format.
Against, I'm going against. I mean, the one of the reasons why Audio Gyan there is because a lot of conversation in the Guru Shishya style used to happen in a dialogue format. There was no written format as such. And what I found is that over a period of time, there must be a lot of lost in translation, and also kind of Chinese whisper which happened in the due course of time. So maybe technology.
So we are going back to the oral tradition in that sense.
But we are trying to document it through the audio medium.
Let's document it. I think it's a good idea. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I think this is how I'm going to do my book. Speak it first and then write it.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Vikram, for giving us your time. And it was pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Kedar. I'll look forward to Audio Gyan on any other occasion that we catch up. Great to have you here in Delhi and do this episode with you.
Sure.
Thanks.
So that's it from today's Gyan session. Stay tuned for more Gyan on Audio Gyan next week. Till then, bye.